The rain lashed against the kitchen window of the craftsman-style house in Portland, Oregon, turning the world outside into a watercolor blur of green and gray. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine cleaner and unsaid things. Sarah wiped the already spotless counter for the third time, her gaze drifting to the living room where her husband, Mark, sat bathed in the blue glow of a football highlight reel. His phone, face down on the arm of the sofa, had buzzed 3 times in the last hour. He hadn't moved to check it. Their son, 8-year-old Leo, was the bridge between them, the reason the beautiful, fragile architecture of their marriage hadn't yet fully collapsed. He was currently sprawled on the rug, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in fierce concentration, constructing a Lego spaceship of staggering complexity. "Okay, buddy," Sarah said, her voice softer than she'd used all day. She walked over and knelt beside him, her knee popping softly. "Time for a haircut. You're starting to look like a little lion." Leo groaned, not looking up from his project. "5 more minutes, Mum. I'm almost done with the hyperdrive." "Nope, now. The deal was after your show, and that was an hour ago." "Come on, I'll do it in the kitchen. You can watch the rain." With the resigned sigh of a prisoner mounting the gallows, Leo trudged to the kitchen chair Sarah had positioned in the center of the room. She draped a worn, striped towel around his shoulders and fetched the professional-grade clippers Mark had bought during a pandemic-induced self-reliance phase. Mark's eyes flicked from the screen to them for a moment, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before the blue glow reclaimed him. Sarah's hands, usually so steady as a graphic designer, trembled slightly as she clicked the clippers on. They buzzed to life, a familiar, domestic sound. She selected a guard, took a deep breath, and positioned herself behind her son. "Okay, honey," she whispered, her mouth close to his ear. "Son, don't move. I'm doing this very carefully, and you'll love the result." It was their ritual phrase. She'd said it before his first haircut, a wisp of baby fine blonde she still kept in a tiny envelope. She'd said it before school picture days, before his role as a tree in the school play. It was her incantation of care, of maternal precision. But as the clippers began their first upward sweep through his thick, sandy hair, the words echoed in the silent spaces of her heart with a new, painful meaning. "Don't move. I'm doing this very carefully." She had been for 6 months. Her infidelity wasn't a passionate, reckless explosion. It was a careful, meticulous construction, brick by emotional brick. His name was David. He was a copywriter at a neighboring firm. Their connection had started over lukewarm coffee at a shared client meeting, a conversation about obscure indie films that lasted 20 minutes past the agenda. It was a tiny crack, a hairline fracture in the monolith of her loneliness. It had grown, carefully. A lunch, then a coffee, then emails that were witty, then warm, then intimate. Texts that arrived like lifelines during another silent dinner with Mark. David saw her. He listened to her ideas about art and her fears about losing herself in motherhood and wifehood. He remembered the name of the French director she loved. Mark hadn't asked about her work in years. The affair had become physical only a month ago. A business trip to Seattle. It wasn't a frenzied coupling in a hotel room. It was careful, too. Hesitant, tender, and filled with a guilty, breathtaking kindness that shattered her. She had carefully laundered the clothes she wore. She had carefully crafted the alibi. She was carefully partitioning her soul, one section for Mark and the life they'd built, one for Leo, and a secret, glowing chamber for David and the woman she was with him. As she guided the clippers around Leo's ear, her eyes stung. This was the epicenter of her guilt. Leo, with his trust that smelled like shampoo and graham crackers. He was the immutable fact, the true north in her spinning moral compass. Every lie was a stone in his foundation. Every careful omission was a termite in the walls of his home. She glanced at Mark. His broad shoulders were slumped, his face tired in the electronic light. He wasn't a bad man. He was a good man who had, somewhere along the way, stopped being her partner and started being a polite roommate. They were a joint venture, a corporation running a household. The passion, the shared dreams, had been filed away in a drawer labeled before Leo. Their conversations were logistical, mortgage, car repairs, Leo's dentist appointment. She had tried, early on, to pull him out of it. She'd planned dates, bought silly gifts, left love notes that he'd find and acknowledge with a puzzled, distant smile. Her efforts had felt like shouting into a canyon. Only her own echo returned. The careful construction of her affair was, in its twisted way, a response to the careful dismantling of her marriage. "Is it straight, Mum?" Leo asked, trying to crane his neck. "Don't move," she repeated, her voice thick. She blinked rapidly. "I'm being very careful." She was sculpting her son's hair, but she felt like she was sculpting a lie. The neat, clean lines she was creating felt like a facade. She thought of David's hands, how they were gentle and sure. He'd traced the line of her jaw last week in his apartment, sunlight striping the bed, and said, "You are the most astonishing person." She had wept afterward, in the shower, scrubbing his scent away, feeling both cherished and vile. The clippers buzzed on. The rain intensified. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, he picked it up. Sarah's heart stopped. She saw his brow furrow as he read the screen. He typed a short reply, then put the phone down, his attention drifting back to the TV. But the line of his jaw had tightened. Was it work, or was it something else? A cold dread trickled down her spine. Was he, too, being careful? The paranoia was new. For months, she had been the sole architect of the deception, moving through her home like a ghost, certain her secret life was invisible. Now, she saw potential clues everywhere. Mark's occasional late nights at the gym, the new password on his laptop, the way he sometimes looked at her, not with anger or suspicion, but with a deep, unreadable sadness, as if he was studying a landscape from a great distance. She finished the back and sides and switched to scissors for the top. Leo was being uncharacteristically still, sensing perhaps the strange charge in the air, the intensity of his mother's silence. "You're doing great, baby," she murmured. "I'm a terrible mother," a voice inside her hissed. "A terrible wife." But another voice, quieter yet stubborn, replied, "I'm a woman drowning, and David handed me a rope. Is it so wrong to cling to it?" But it was wrong. She knew it in the marrow of her bones every time Leo called her mom. She knew it when she saw the wedding photo on the stairs, their younger selves beaming with a future that felt now like a story about other people. The carefulness of her affair wasn't nobility, it was the architecture of cowardice. She was carefully trying to have everything, knowing deep down she was risking it all. "All done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She brushed the loose hairs from his neck and held up a hand mirror. "What do you think?" Leo examined his reflection, turning his head side to side. A slow, gap-toothed grin spread across his face. "Awesome. It looks so fast. Like a racer." Her heart, a heavy, bruised thing, lifted a fraction. "Yeah, you love the result. I love it." He threw his arms around her neck, the towel falling to the floor. "Thanks, Mum." He smelled of innocence and love, and the hug felt like both a blessing and a condemnation. Over his small shoulder, she locked eyes with Mark. He had muted the TV and was watching them. The sadness in his gaze was gone, replaced by something else, something weary and decisive. "Leo," Mark said, his voice calm. "Go put your PJs on, buddy. I need to talk to Mum." The words were normal, but the tone was a door clicking shut. Leo, oblivious, scampered off, already making engine noises for his new aerodynamic head. Sarah stood frozen, the scissors dangling from her hand. The buzz of the clippers still seemed to vibrate in the air. Mark stood up and walked to the kitchen island, leaning against it. He picked up one of Leo's discarded Lego pieces, turning it over in his fingers. "Sarah," he began, then stopped. He took a long, slow breath, as if steeling himself. "I got a credit card bill today for a hotel in Seattle. The weekend you said you were at the team building retreat." The world didn't shatter. It crystallized. Every sound, the drumming rain, the hum of the refrigerator, became sharp, clear, and painful. All her carefulness, her meticulous planning, collapsed under the weight of a single piece of paper. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The lie she'd prepared, it was for the client meeting, "I'll expense it," died on her tongue. She just stood there, holding the scissors, covered in the physical evidence of her care for their son. Mark looked at her, and his eyes were full of a profound, weary knowledge. "Don't bother," he said softly. "I already know how." The word was a croak, a feeling, then the proof. He put the Lego piece down. "I've known for a while, I think. I just didn't want to know." He looked toward the stairs where Leo had disappeared. "We have to be careful now. More than anything, we have to be careful for him." Tears spilled hot and fast down Sarah's cheeks. This was the result. Not a neat haircut, but this devastating quiet in her kitchen. The careful web she'd woven had ensnared her. Mark wasn't yelling. He was grieving. And in his grief, he was already thinking like a father, not a husband. "It's over," she gasped, the truth tumbling out. "With him. It was a mistake, Mark. It was." "Stop," he said, raising a hand. His voice was firm, but not cruel. "Just stop. I don't want the details. Not now. Maybe not ever." He rubbed his face. "We need to figure out what happens next." For Leo, he was being careful. He was doing this, the dismantling of their life, with a precision that shamed her own clandestine care. He was prioritizing their son's stability over his own rage, his own shattered heart. In that moment, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with, decent, solid, responsible, and the sight was a knife to her soul. She had mistaken his quiet for absence, his steadiness for dullness. She had traded a bedrock for a sparkler. The following weeks were an exercise in surreal, agonizing care. They told Leo together, sitting on his bed, using phrases like "Mom and Dad love you very much and we'll always be your parents." Leo cried, asked if it was his fault, and clung to them both. Their promise to be careful for him was the only oath left between them. Sarah moved into the apartment downtown she'd shared with David for a handful of afternoons. She ended it with him the day after the conversation. He was hurt, confused, but part of her suspected he was also relieved. Their affair had been a beautiful, pressure-free escape. It couldn't survive the harsh, real-world light of a collapsing marriage. It had been a careful construction for a fantasy life, and it evaporated under the weight of reality. The divorce proceedings were civil, focused almost entirely on custody. They became experts in co-parenting, in seamless transitions, in maintaining consistent rules across two households. They were so careful it was suffocating. One Saturday morning, 6 months later, Sarah picked Leo up from Mark's. He needed a haircut. As he sat on a chair in her brightly lit bathroom, she draped the same striped towel around his shoulders. "Okay, buddy," she said, her voice catching. The phrase felt sacred now, scarred. "Don't move. I'm doing this very carefully." Leo, older looking now, more thoughtful, nodded quietly. As she started the clippers, he spoke, his eyes on his reflection. "Dad says you both love me more than anything." She had to stop, her breath hitching. "He's right. We do. That's the one true thing, Leo. The truest thing in the world." "I know," he said, with a simple faith that broke and healed her simultaneously. She finished the haircut, her hands truly steady for the first time in a year. There was no more secret to carry, no more double life to meticulously manage. There was only this clear, painful, honest reality, the love for her son, the consequences of her choices, and the long, careful road of making amends. When she was done, she showed him the mirror. "What do you think?" He smiled, a smaller smile than before, but genuine. "It's good. Thanks, Mum." She hugged him, and this time, the hug felt simply like love, and